At my wife's work party, her male boss challenged me, spat on my face, and said, "She's mine at work. Wait for your turn." Unaware of my true identity. Before I reveal everything that happened to me, go grab your copy of the audiobook, Brutal Cheating Stories That Shocked the World. It's raw, real, and 10 times wilder than what you're hearing right now. Link in the pinned comment. Look, I've been to some pretentious events in my life, but the annual Bright Edge Media corporate party was like watching peacocks try to outstrut each other in a cage made of champagne flutes and passive aggression. The kind of place where everyone's smile was practiced in a mirror and their handshake came with a silent calculation of your net worth. If hell had a VIP section, it would look exactly like this. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, and a bartender who probably earned more than most teachers just for knowing how to pronounce Aperol Spritz without sounding like a tourist in Italy. My wife Clara had been talking about this thing for weeks. She worked for Bright Edge Media, one of those marketing juggernauts that convinced people they needed things they absolutely didn't need. And apparently, this party was the social equivalent of the Oscars mixed with a gladiator arena. Attendance wasn't optional, it was a blood oath. Miss it, and you might as well update your LinkedIn profile, because Karen from HR would remember, and Karen never forgot. Clara looked absolutely killer in her emerald green dress, the kind that made every other woman in the room reassess their life choices, and every man suddenly develop neck problems from doing double takes. Me? I wore a navy suit that I'd owned since 2019 and shoes I'd polished that morning while watching ESPN. I'm Lucas Gray, by the way, though most people at these corporate circuses knew me as Clara's husband, or, if they were feeling particularly condescending, the carpenter guy. And honestly, I preferred it that way. Let them think I spent my days measuring wood and arguing with Home Depot employees about lumber grades. It kept things simple, kept me off the radar, and most importantly, kept me from having to engage in conversations about quarterly projections and synergy, a word that should be banned from the English language, by the way. The truth was a little more complicated, but then again, the truth usually is. Carpentry wasn't my career, it was my therapy. My actual job involved cybersecurity contracts for Fortune 500 companies and the occasional government agency that needed someone to make sure their digital infrastructure wasn't held together with duct tape and prayers. But here's the thing about being good at cybersecurity. The moment people know what you do, they either want free tech support for their iPhone or they start getting paranoid that you're reading their emails. So yeah, I let everyone think I was just the simple craftsman husband who showed up, drank beer, and nodded politely while they talked about KPIs and brand positioning like they were curing cancer. The venue was this rooftop bar in downtown that probably charged more for a vodka tonic than I spent on groceries in a week. You could see the city skyline glittering like someone had spilled diamonds across black velvet. And there was this pretentious jazz band in the corner playing music that was just complex enough to make you feel uncultured if you didn't nod along appreciatively. The whole setup screamed, "We have budget to burn," which I guess was the point. Nothing says successful marketing company like spending obscene amounts of money to make your employees feel simultaneously special and utterly replaceable. Clara was in full networking mode, which meant I was officially arm candy for the evening. My job was simple. Look presentable, don't embarrass her, and for the love of God, don't mention anything that might make her boss uncomfortable. Her boss, Brian Kavanaugh. Even his name sounded like it came with a trust fund and a yacht. This guy was a legend at Bright Edge. And not the good kind of legend. More like the kind of legend that involved HR complaints swept under rugs and interns who mysteriously requested transfers after 3 months. He ran the creative department like a dictator with a Pinterest board, and his hair gel, I swear to God, probably had its own line item in the company budget. The man looked like he'd stepped out of a cologne commercial, the kind where some male model broods on a clifftop while a voiceover talks about the essence of power or some other nonsense. I spotted him across the room almost immediately. He was impossible to miss, holding court near the bar with a cluster of junior executives who laughed at everything he said like their mortgages depended on it. Which, to be fair, they probably did. Brian had this way of commanding attention, not because he was particularly charismatic, but because he was their boss, and people are evolutionarily hardwired to kiss up to whoever controls their paychecks. "Try to be nice tonight," Clara whispered to me as we grabbed drinks. She knew me too well. The last company event I'd attended, I'd made the mistake of correcting someone's cryptocurrency investment strategy, and let's just say it didn't go over well when his Bitcoin portfolio tanked 3 days later. "I'm always nice," I said, flashing her my most innocent smile. She gave me that look, the one that said she loved me, but also wouldn't hesitate to murder me if I ruined her career trajectory. The party continued in full swing around us. There was Deborah from accounting doing her annual drunk pitch for why the company needed a meditation room, and Marcus from sales trying to convince anyone who'd listened that he'd almost closed a deal with Apple. Narrator: he hadn't. The whole scene was like watching a nature documentary about corporate animals in their natural habitat, territorial, hierarchical, and powered by expensive alcohol. I was on my second beer, comfortably invisible in my role as the carpenter husband, when I noticed Brian making his way toward us. He moved through the crowd like a shark through water, purposeful, confident, and completely oblivious to the fact that half the people smiling at him were secretly hoping he'd choke on an olive. "Clara," he boomed, his voice carrying that particular brand of fake enthusiasm that managers perfect over years of mandatory leadership seminars. His eyes swept over her in a way that made my jaw tighten involuntarily, then landed on me like I was an interesting stain on an otherwise clean carpet. "And you must be Lucas, the craftsman." The way he said craftsman made it sound like I spent my days making macaroni art for kindergarten bulletin boards. I could feel Clara tense beside me, her hand subtly squeezing my arm in warning. "But hey, I'm a professional." I smiled, shook his hand with just enough pressure to be polite, and said, "That's me. I make things that last longer than advertising slogans." A few people nearby actually snickered. Brian's smile stayed plastered on his face, but something flickered behind his eyes, something that told me this guy wasn't used to being the punchline. Clara's grip on my arm went from warning squeeze to potential circulation cutoff, which in wife speak translated roughly to "shut up before you get us both fired." But here's the thing about guys like Brian Kavanaugh: they don't just let things go. And as I stood there in that overpriced rooftop bar, surrounded by overdressed people playing pretend, I had no idea that I'd just lit a fuse that would burn all the way through the next few months of our lives. Sometimes being underestimated is the best weapon you never asked for. If you've never been to a corporate party where everyone's dressed like they're attending a wedding but acting like they're at a boxing weigh-in, let me paint you a picture. The rooftop bar looked like someone had taken a Pinterest board titled Luxury Goals and given it unlimited funding and zero taste. Everything glittered, and I mean everything. The glasses, the ice sculptures that were definitely going to be puddles in an hour. Even the damn napkins had some kind of metallic threading that probably cost more than my truck payment. It was the kind of place designed to make you feel simultaneously impressed and inadequate, which I'm pretty sure was the whole point. Clara was working the room like a pro, and I had to hand it to her. She was damn good at this corporate theater thing. She had that perfect balance of friendly but not too friendly, interested but not desperate, confident but not threatening. It's an art form, really, watching someone navigate office politics in real time. She'd laugh at someone's joke, touch their arm just enough to seem engaged, then gracefully extract herself before they could corner her into a 20-minute monologue about their weekend boat trip or their kids' lacrosse tournament. Me? I was the accessory, the plus one, the guy who stood there with a beer, nodded at the appropriate moments, and tried not to look like I was mentally calculating how many episodes of The Office I could have watched instead of being here. But I played my part, smiled when introduced, shook hands, made small talk about the weather and traffic. You know, the conversational equivalent of elevator music. The crowd was exactly what you'd expect from a marketing company that charged clients six figures to tell them their logo needed to be more dynamic. There was Jeremy from the digital team, who definitely vapes and won't shut up about his podcast that has exactly 47 listeners, most of whom are his relatives. Sandra from client relations was holding court near the shrimp cocktail display, laughing too loud at her own stories about difficult clients, which was rich considering everyone knew she was the difficult one. And then there was Todd. Every company has a Todd, who worked in IT and spent the entire evening trying to explain blockchain to anyone unfortunate enough to make eye contact with him. I watched these people mingle like they were politicians at a fundraiser, all smiles and calculated conversations. You could practically see the mental spreadsheets behind their eyes, running calculations on who was worth networking with, whose star was rising, and who might be dead weight come next quarter's restructuring. It was fascinating in a morbid sort of way, like watching piranhas in business casual. "You doing okay?" Clara asked during a brief moment when we were alone by the bar. She looked concerned, which was fair because I probably had that glazed look I get when I'm trying to remember if I set the DVR to record the game. "Living the dream," I said, raising my beer bottle in a mock toast. Though I gotta say, that guy Todd just tried to explain NFTs to me using a napkin and a metaphor involving his grandmother's attic. I think I lost brain cells. She laughed, a real laugh, not the corporate one, and for a second, she was just Clara again, not Clara from Bright Edge Media. "Just a few more hours," she promised. "Then we can go home, order pizza, and you can tell me everything you've been thinking but not saying." "Gonna need a bigger pizza," I muttered, and she elbowed me gently in the ribs. The jazz band transitioned into something that I think was supposed to be sophisticated but mostly sounded like a cat walking on a piano. People swayed anyway because that's what you do at these things. You pretend to appreciate culture even if you'd rather be listening to classic rock on the drive home. I was halfway through my second beer and seriously considering whether it was too early to fake a phone call from our non-existent babysitter when I noticed the shift in the room's energy. It was subtle, like when a predator enters the watering hole and all the other animals suddenly get very aware of their surroundings. Conversations didn't stop, but they changed, got a little more performative, a little louder, like everyone was suddenly auditioning for something. Brian Kavanaugh had moved from his position by the bar and was making rounds. And by rounds, I mean he was working the room like a king surveying his kingdom, stopping at clusters of employees who immediately straightened up and laughed a little too hard at whatever he was saying. The guy had presence, I'll give him that. Not the good kind of presence, like a motivational speaker or a beloved teacher. More like the presence of your boss when you've been on Facebook for the last hour and suddenly hear his footsteps approaching your cubicle. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than some people's cars. Charcoal gray with a subtle pinstripe that screamed, "I have a tailor, not a closet." His shirt was so white it could have been used as a surrender flag, and his tie was that perfect shade of power red that politicians wear when they want to look authoritative. And that hair. Jesus, that hair. It was swept back in that "I'm too important for gravity" style, held in place by what I can only assume was industrial-strength gel mixed with pure arrogance. Clara noticed him too. I felt her tense beside me, saw her unconsciously straighten her posture and check her dress. "He's coming over here," she whispered, and there was something in her voice. Not fear exactly, but definitely wariness. Like someone who's about to pet a dog they're not entirely sure is friendly. "Want me to pretend I need to use the bathroom?" I offered, but she shook her head. "No, stay. Just be good." Those two words carried the weight of our mortgage, her career ambitions, and probably her entire retirement plan. No pressure or anything. I watched Brian navigate through the crowd, stopping to clasp shoulders, lean in for private comments that made people nod seriously, accept compliments with practiced humility that was about as genuine as a $3 bill. He was good at this, I had to admit it. The man knew how to work a room, how to make each person feel like they were the most important employee in the company for exactly 30 seconds before moving on to the next one. And then his eyes landed on Clara. I saw it happen. That moment of recognition followed by something else, something that made my grip tighten slightly on my beer bottle. It wasn't quite appropriate, but it wasn't quite inappropriate either. It existed in that gray area that HR departments have nightmares about, the kind of look that could be explained away as professional interest, but felt like something else entirely. He changed trajectory, heading straight for us with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life and wouldn't know what to do with it if he was. Clara's hand found mine, squeezed once. A message in Morse code that roughly translated to "Please don't embarrass me in front of my boss who controls my paycheck and possibly my entire future." "Clara." His voice boomed across the remaining distance, warm and performative, like a game show host greeting a contestant. "There's my star player." She smiled, her professional smile, the one she'd probably practiced in the bathroom mirror before we left. "Hi, Brian. Great party. Only the best for the best," he said. Then his eyes slid to me like I was an afterthought, which I probably was. "And you must be the famous Lucas I've heard so much about." "Famous. Right. I was about as famous as a gas station sandwich. But sure, let's go with that. His hand extended toward me, and I shook it, noting the firm grip that was trying just a little too hard to establish dominance. This guy probably read articles about power handshakes and thought he was being subtle. That's me, I said easily. The carpenter husband. Ah yes, the craftsman. The way the word rolled off his tongue made it sound like a cute hobby, something quaint and rustic that simple folk did with their hands. How charming. We need more people who work with their hands in this world. So authentic. Authentic. That word coming from a guy whose entire personality was probably focus grouped and market tested was almost funny enough to make me choke on my beer. Clara's nails dug slightly into my palm. Behave, the pressure said. Be good. Don't ruin this. But here's the thing about being underestimated. It's only annoying until it becomes useful. So here's something they don't teach you in any self-help book or conflict resolution seminar. What to do when your wife's boss decides to mark his territory like a drunk fraternity brother who just discovered alpha male podcasts. Because that's exactly what was about to happen, and I had about 3 seconds to decide whether I was going to be the bigger person or the person who makes HR earn their salary. Brian was still standing there with that smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, the kind of smile that sharks probably have right before they bite. He'd already established that I was the craftsman, which in his world apparently ranked somewhere between court jester and potted plant in terms of social hierarchy. But he wasn't done. Oh no. Guys like Brian are never done when they think they've found someone they can punch down on. So, Lucas, he said, and I could smell the whiskey on his breath from 2 feet away. Top shelf whiskey, naturally, because Brian Kavanaugh didn't drink anything that came in a plastic bottle. What's it like being married to one of my best employees? He emphasized the word "my" just enough to make it weird, like he was talking about a prized racehorse instead of a human woman with a master's degree and a mortgage. Clara's hand in mine had gone from gentle squeeze to death grip. I could feel her willing me to play nice, to laugh it off, to do whatever it took to not make waves in front of her boss and half her department, who were definitely pretending not to watch this interaction while absolutely watching this interaction. It's pretty great, I said, keeping my voice neutral and pleasant, like we were discussing the weather or the proper way to assemble IKEA furniture. She's brilliant at what she does. Oh, she is, Brian agreed, nodding with the exaggerated enthusiasm of someone who'd had 3 drinks too many and thought he was being charming. Absolutely brilliant. You know, Lucas, we work her pretty hard here at Bright Edge. Long hours, late nights, weekend emergencies. The creative department never sleeps. He leaned in closer, and I noticed a few people around us had gone quiet. That particular kind of quiet that happens right before something interesting goes down at a party. She's dedicated, I said, still playing the role of the supportive husband who definitely wasn't calculating exactly how much effort it would take to accidentally spill my beer on this guy's probably $1,000 suit. Brian's smile widened, and there was something predatory in it now, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Dedicated. That's one word for it. He turned to look at Clara, and the way his eyes traveled over her made me want to introduce his face to the nearest wall. She's special, this one. Really special. You're a lucky man, Lucas. I know, I said, because what else was I supposed to say? Thanks for objectifying my wife at your corporate party. Then Brian did something that will forever be burned into my memory as the moment he signed his own professional death warrant. He turned back to me, swaying slightly, that whiskey-fueled confidence radiating off him like cheap cologne, and said, "You know what, Lucas? Let me give you some advice. Man to man." He put his hand on my shoulder. Actually put his hand on my shoulder, like we were buddies, like he was about to share some profound wisdom instead of what I knew was going to be grade A douchebaggery. Here's the thing about Clara, he continued, and I could feel every muscle in my body tensing. During work hours? She's mine. I need her. She's there. Project deadline at midnight? She's there. Client emergency on Sunday? She's there. That's how we operate in the big leagues. He paused for effect, looking around to make sure people were listening, which they absolutely were. The jazz band might as well have stopped playing. So what I'm saying is, buddy, she's mine at work. You wait for your turn at home. The silence that followed was the kind of silence you hear right before a bomb goes off. I actually heard someone gasp. Deborah from accounting looked like she'd just witnessed a car accident. Even Todd stopped mid-blockchain explanation to stare. Clara's face had gone pale, then red, cycling through emotions faster than a slot machine. I could feel her mortification radiating off her in waves, could sense her mental calculations about how to salvage this situation, how to laugh it off, how to pretend this wasn't the most inappropriate thing her boss could have possibly said at a company function. But Brian wasn't finished with his performance. Oh no. In what I can only assume was a moment of truly spectacular poor judgment fueled by expensive whiskey and an ego the size of Texas, he actually leaned forward and spat. Actually spat in my direction. Not a full-on spit, but one of those dismissive little gestures that's somehow worse, like I was beneath even the effort of a proper insult. Time did that weird thing where it slows down and speeds up simultaneously. I was aware of multiple things at once. The fleck of moisture on my cheek, Clara's sharp intake of breath, the collective shock rippling through the crowd, and the little voice in my head that sounded suspiciously like my therapist saying, "Count to 10. Lucas, count to 10. I counted to 3. Close enough. I reached up slowly, very slowly, and wiped my face with one of those overpriced napkins that probably cost $5 each. The whole time, I maintained eye contact with Brian, who was still grinning like he'd just won some kind of alpha male championship. The crowd had gone from silent to dead silent, the kind of silence where you could hear people's careers flashing before their eyes. "You sure you're her boss?" I said finally, my voice calm and conversational, like we were discussing sports scores. Because that's the kind of behavior HR usually uses as training material. You know, in those what not to do videos they showed during orientation. Somewhere to my left, someone made a noise that was half laugh, half choke. It spread like wildfire, nervous. If you've never been dragged across a rooftop bar by your spouse while she's simultaneously trying to smile at her coworkers and also plan your murder, let me tell you, it's an experience. Clara had my arm in a grip that would have made a UFC fighter proud, and she was moving with the kind of purposeful speed that suggested we were either heading toward a private conversation or she was about to throw me off the building. Given the look on her face, it was honestly 50-50. "Smile," she hissed through her teeth as we passed Deborah from accounting, who was watching us with the kind of fascination usually reserved for reality TV drama. Clara's face was locked in this pleasant expression that absolutely did not match the death grip she had on my bicep. "Act normal." "I am acting normal," I said, waving at Todd, who looked like he'd just witnessed the most exciting thing to happen at a corporate party since someone got drunk and photobombed their ass 3 years ago. Completely normal. Just a guy enjoying a lovely evening with his wife who definitely isn't planning his funeral right now. We made it to the balcony, an actual balcony, not just the rooftop area, because apparently this venue had multiple outdoor spaces for varying levels of dramatic confrontations. This one was smaller, more private, with those heat lamps that rich people use so they can pretend they're enjoying nature while still being comfortable. The city lights sprawled out below us, all twinkling and peaceful, completely oblivious to the domestic situation about to unfold. The second we were alone, Clara dropped my arm and whirled on me like a tornado in a designer dress. "What the hell was that, Lucas?" "Well," I said, leaning against the railing and trying to look casual, "I believe that's what experts call standing up to a bully. Though I'm open to other interpretations. You embarrassed him." Her voice was that particular pitch that wives achieve when they're trying to yell whisper, which is somehow more terrifying than actual yelling. In front of everyone. In front of the entire creative department. Half the executives, and she stopped, pressing her hands to her temples like she was trying to prevent her brain from exploding. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Team building," I offered, and immediately regretted it when her eyes snapped to mine with the intensity of a laser-guided missile. "Okay, bad joke. But Clara, come on. The guy literally spat at me. That's not normal boss behavior. That's not even normal human behavior. That's chimpanzee at the zoo behavior." "He was drunk," she protested, but even she didn't sound convinced. "So am I pointed out. 2 beers deep, and somehow I'm managing not to spit on people and claim ownership of other human beings like I'm a feudal lord in a medieval kingdom." I paused, studying her face in the weird orange glow of the heat lamp. "Wait, is this normal for him? Does he always?" "No," she said quickly. "Too quickly. I mean, he can be intense, demanding, but he's never." She trailed off, and I watched her trying to find words that would somehow make her boss's behavior acceptable, which was depressing as hell because it meant she'd been making excuses for this guy for who knows how long. Clara. I said her name softly, and she looked up at me with those eyes that I'd fallen in love with back in college when we were both broke and idealistic and thought we'd change the world. He said you were his, that I had to wait my turn. Do you understand how messed up that is? I know, she whispered, and for a second she just looked tired. I know, Lucas, but this is my job. This is my career. I've worked so hard to get where I am, and Brian, like him or not, he has influence. He can make or break people at this company. And you just, she gestured helplessly back toward the party. You just humiliated him in front of everyone. Good, I said flatly. He deserved it. That's not how this works. The volume was creeping back up now, frustration overtaking the exhaustion. You don't just embarrass your wife's boss because he said something stupid while drunk. You smile, you nod, you let it go, and then we talk about it at home like adults. He spat on me. I repeated, because apparently, we were just going to keep glossing over that part. Clara, seriously. The man spat. On. Me. That's not a let-it-go situation. That's a call security and possibly a therapist situation. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath, probably counting to 10 or reciting some mantra about patience and marriage vows and not strangling your spouse at corporate events. When she opened them again, she'd shifted into damage control mode. I could see it happen, watched her put on her professional armor. I need to go back in there. I need to smooth this over, apologize on your behalf. Don't, I said, and something in my voice made her stop. Don't apologize for me, Clara. I'm not sorry. Lucas. I'm not sorry that I stood up to a guy who treats you like property. I'm not sorry that I called him out for being inappropriate and unprofessional. And I'm definitely not sorry that I embarrassed him, because maybe, just maybe, he needed to be embarrassed. For a long moment, we just stood there staring at each other, the city humming below us, the distant sound of that terrible jazz band floating through the air. I could see her trying to decide something, weighing her career against her dignity, calculating the cost of standing by me versus the cost of standing by her boss. Finally, she shook her head. I can't believe you sometimes. I know, I said. It's part of my charm. This isn't funny, Lucas. This is my livelihood. Our livelihood. The mortgage, the car payments, She stopped herself, took another breath. I need to go back in there and fix this. She looked at me like she was trying to solve a complicated math problem. Just stay out here for a bit, okay? Cool off. Don't talk to anyone. Especially not Brian. Scout's honor, I said, holding up 3 fingers. You were never a Boy Scout. Details. I watched her turn to leave, then called after her. Hey, Clara. She paused at the doorway, looking back. For what it's worth, you're way too good for this place. For him. You know that, right? Her expression softened for just a second. Just long enough for me to see the woman I married underneath all the corporate armor and career anxiety. Then it was gone, and she was striding back into the party, shoulders squared, ready to do whatever political maneuvering was necessary to save her job from her husband's big mouth. I stayed on the balcony for a while after she left, nursing my beer and watching the city lights. The thing was, Clara thought I'd just made a massive tactical error. Embarrassed her boss, potentially damaged her career, all because of my pride or my temper or whatever narrative she was constructing to make sense of what happened. But here's what she didn't know. What Brian definitely didn't know. What nobody at that party knew except for maybe 3 people in BrightEdge's IT department who'd signed NDAs thicker than phone books. BrightEdge Media's entire server infrastructure, every database, every security protocol, every firewall keeping their precious client data safe from hackers and corporate espionage, was built on a system I personally designed 3 years ago. My consulting firm had done the whole thing, soup to nuts, and we still maintained it under a very quiet, very lucrative contract that came up for renewal every 18 months. Brian Kavanaugh's entire kingdom, all his creative genius, all his award-winning campaigns, all his precious intellectual property, was sitting on my code, protected by my firewalls, backed up by my security protocols. The carpenter he'd just spat on wasn't just some guy who showed up to parties in an off-the-rack suit. I was the guy who could, theoretically, bring his entire company to its knees with a few keystrokes. Not that I would, obviously. I'm not a psychopath, and also it would be incredibly illegal. But the point was, Brian had just picked a fight with the one person at that party who actually had leverage over him, even if he was too drunk and arrogant to realize it. I finished my beer and headed back inside, walking past clusters of people who suddenly found their drinks very interesting when I approached. Clara was across the room doing damage control with what looked like Brian's assistant and a couple of senior VPs. She looked stressed but composed, every inch the professional rising star. I caught the bartender's eye and ordered another beer. He looked at me with something like respect, or maybe horror, hard to tell, and poured me a generous one. "Rough night?" he asked. "Just getting started," I said, raising my bottle in a toast to absolutely nothing. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't immediate. Sometimes it's patient. Sometimes it's just sitting back and waiting for karma to do its thing while you hold all the cards and nobody even knows you're playing. 3 days after the party from hell, I was sitting in my home office, which is really just the spare bedroom with better Wi-Fi, drinking coffee and pretending to care about a proposal for a bank in Chicago that wanted to upgrade their cybersecurity. It was Tuesday morning, which meant Clara had already left for work at the ungodly hour of 7:30, armed with her travel mug of anxiety and determination. She'd been weird since the party, oscillating between not speaking to me and speaking to me in that overly polite way that married people do when they're mad, but trying to pretend everything's fine for the sake of domestic peace. My phone buzzed with an email notification, and I glanced at it expecting another spam message about cryptocurrency investments or some prince in Nigeria who desperately needed my bank account information. Instead, it was from my business partner, Marcus Chun, not to be confused with Marcus from sales at Clara's company, because apparently every corporate environment is legally required to have at least 3 guys named Marcus. The subject line read, "Bright Edge having a bad day LOL." I opened it. Marcus had forwarded me an email chain. One of those classic corporate panic spirals where everyone's replying all and nobody's actually solving anything. The original message was from Brian's assistant, some poor woman named Jennifer, whose job apparently included sending company-wide emergency notifications at 8 in the morning. Urgent. Server outage affecting all creative department files. Data corruption suspected. IT is investigating. All morning meetings postponed until further notice. I snorted coffee through my nose, which hurt but was worth it. Marcus had added his own commentary at the top. "Dude, isn't this your system? Want me to check it out, or you want to let them suffer for a bit?" Smiling face with horns. Here's the thing about being a cybersecurity consultant. Most of your job is preventing problems, but occasionally, very occasionally, you get to watch people create their own problems through sheer incompetence and then panic about it. It's like being a lifeguard watching someone ignore the no diving sign and then act shocked when they belly flop. I logged into Bright Edge's backend system using my admin credentials. Yes, I still had those, because that's how contracts work when you build someone's entire digital infrastructure. The dashboard loaded, and I immediately saw the problem. It wasn't a hack, wasn't a virus, wasn't even particularly complicated. Their systems administrator, some guy they'd hired 6 months ago, who probably looked great on paper, but couldn't troubleshoot his way out of a cardboard box, had ignored approximately 17 automated warnings about a critical security update. 17. I know because I designed the system to send increasingly urgent notifications, escalating from polite suggestions to digital screaming. The update was important because it patched a vulnerability in their file management system. Without it, the database could develop corruption issues if multiple users tried to access large files simultaneously, which is exactly what happened when the creative department all tried to download the same client presentation at 8 a.m. Tuesday morning, because apparently nobody at Bright Edge believed in planning ahead. I could fix it in about 20 minutes. The question was whether I should. I texted Marcus, not a hack. Their admin ignored my warnings. Classic pebcac situation. He replied immediately. Problem exists between keyboard and share? Face with tears of joy, so you fixing it or nah? That was the question, wasn't it? On one hand, it was technically my system, my responsibility to maintain it per the contract. On the other hand, Brian Kavanaugh had spat on me 3 days ago, and the petty part of my brain, which was admittedly a larger part than I'd like to admit, wanted to let him sweat for a while. Watch him squirm. Maybe learn a little humility. My phone rang. "Clara, this couldn't be good." "Hey, sweetheart." I answered, going for casual, and probably missing by a mile. Lucas. Her voice had that tight quality that meant she was stressed and probably surrounded by people. Are you busy right now? Just working on some stuff. Why? What's up? The servers are down at work. Everything's down. We have a client presentation in 3 hours that we can't access, and Brian is losing his mind. He's yelling at IT. IT is yelling at each other, and nobody knows what's happening. She paused. I needed to hear your voice. This day is already a disaster. Guilt is a funny thing. It can make you do stupid, selfless things even when the vindictive part of your brain is screaming at you to stand down and let karma work. I looked at my computer screen, at the simple fix that would take me less time than it takes to microwave popcorn, and sighed. It's probably just a system update issue, I said carefully. These things usually resolve themselves pretty quickly. I hope so. Brian's talking about firing the entire IT department, which is ridiculous, but you know how he gets. There was noise in the background, someone calling her name. I have to go. Love you. Love you too. I hung up and stared at my screen for another 30 seconds, having an internal debate about marriage, loyalty, and whether being the bigger person was really worth it when the smaller person was such a colossal ass. Then I fixed it. Because I'm apparently a better person than I give myself credit for, or maybe just a sucker who can't stand to see his wife stressed out. 22 minutes later, Brightedge servers were humming along like nothing had happened. I'd patched the vulnerability, cleaned up the corrupted data, and even optimized a few things while I was in there, because I'm a professional and I take pride in my work, even when the client is a jackass. I sent Marcus an update. Fixed. They're back online. His response, you're too nice. I would have let them burn. Yeah, well, my wife works there. Fair. Still think you're too nice, though. I went back to my coffee and the boring bank proposal, thinking that was the end of it. Crisis averted, marriage preserved. Everyone moves on with their lives. But here's where it gets interesting. About an hour later, Marcus forwarded me another email chain. This one was from Brian himself, sent to the entire company with that particular brand of self-congratulatory tone that managers use when they want credit for something they had nothing to do with. Team, thanks to my direct intervention and quick thinking, we've resolved this morning's technical issues. I worked closely with our IT department to identify and fix the problem. This is why strong leadership matters in crisis situations. Back to work, everyone. Let's make today count. I actually laughed out loud. The man had gone from screaming at IT to taking full credit for a fix he didn't even know had happened. It was beautiful in its audacity, like watching someone claim they'd invented the wheel while standing next to an actual wheel inventor. Dude, Marcus texted. Dude, did you see this? I saw it. You gonna say something? Nope. Why not? Because, I typed back, grinning at my screen. I'm playing the long game now. See, here's what Brian didn't know. What nobody at Brightedge, except maybe their CFO and legal department knew, was that every action on their system was logged. Every fix, every patch, every administrative access. And all those logs were time-stamped and attributed to specific user accounts. My user account, specifically. But more importantly, Brian's little heroic narrative had caught the attention of someone who actually mattered. By Thursday afternoon, Clara called me again, this time with a different energy entirely. You're not going to believe this, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. The board decided to do a full IT audit. Something about wanting to understand our technical infrastructure and resilience planning after this week's outage. That's so, I said, still playing dumb. Yeah, Brian's been bragging about his tech skills, and apparently someone on the board actually knows about computers and wants to verify our systems are solid. She laughed. He's been in meetings all day. It's kind of satisfying, actually. I bet, I said, and I wasn't lying. Because here's the thing about audits. They're thorough. They look at contracts, vendor relationships, system logs, everything. And when Brightedge's board brought in their auditors to examine the company's cybersecurity infrastructure, they were going to find something very interesting in the confidential vendor files. A contract with Gray and Chun Cybersecurity Solutions. A very lucrative contract. One that listed me, Lucas Gray, the carpenter, as the senior consultant and primary system architect. Brian thought he'd embarrassed me at that party. Thought he'd put the simple craftsman in his place. But he was about to learn what every good carpenter knows. Measure twice, cut once. And buddy, I'd been measuring this guy since the moment he spat in my direction. By the following Monday, the universe had apparently decided that my life needed to be more interesting because my phone wouldn't stop buzzing with texts from Clara. Not angry texts this time, confused texts, which was somehow worse. The kind of texts that start with, "Okay, so something weird is happening," and end with "call me when you can," which in married person code translates to, "I need you to explain what the hell is going on before I lose my mind." I was at Home Depot, actually doing carpenter stuff, because irony is alive and well, comparing wood stains for a bookshelf project when my phone rang. Clara's name flashed on the screen along with a photo from our honeymoon, where we both looked younger and significantly less concerned about corporate drama. "Hey babe," I answered, wedging the phone between my ear and shoulder while holding two different stain samples up to the light like I was some kind of wood whisperer. "Lucas." Her voice had that quality that sits somewhere between amazement and mild panic. "What did you do?" "Well, right now I'm trying to decide between early American and special walnut, which sounds like a paint color but is apparently a legitimate." "Lucas, I'm serious." "What did you do?" I put down the wood stain samples and gave her my full attention, because that tone meant business. "I'm gonna need more context here, sweetheart." "What are we talking about?" "Everyone's talking," she said, and I could hear the buzz of the office in the background. Phones ringing, people chattering, the general chaos of a Monday morning at a marketing company. "Like everyone, the audit report came back, and apparently your name is all over it." My stomach did a little flip, but I kept my voice casual. "My name? That's weird. What exactly are people saying? That you're not a carpenter? That you're some kind of cybersecurity expert? That you built our entire server infrastructure?" She paused, and I heard a door close. She'd moved somewhere private. "Lucas, is this true? Did you build Bright Edge Systems?" Well, the cat was out of the bag now. Might as well own it. "Yeah," I said simply. "About 3 years ago, my company got the contract. It's good work, solid pay, interesting challenges." I didn't mention it because, honestly, it never really came up. "You were excited about your job. I was doing my thing. Seemed easier to just keep work separate." "Easier," she repeated slowly, like she was tasting the word and finding it bitter. "Lucas, do you have any idea what's happening here right now?" Brian found out this morning during the executive briefing. Apparently, the CFO mentioned that we should thank Lucas Gray's firm for saving us 6 figures in potential breach costs last quarter. I couldn't help it, I grinned. "Oh yeah? How'd Brian take that news?" He turned white. Like vampire white. Like he'd seen a ghost, or gotten a tax audit, or found out his hair gel was discontinued. Despite her stressed tone, I could hear the hint of satisfaction in Clara's voice. Then he just sat there for the rest of the meeting looking like someone had told him Santa wasn't real, and also he owed Santa back taxes. "That's unfortunate," I said, not meaning it even a little bit. "Lucas, this is serious. Everyone knows now. They know you're not just some carpenter husband. They know you're," she struggled for the words, "important. Like, actually important to the company. More important than half the people at that party." "I'm really not, though," I protested, because it was true. "I just built their security system. It's not a big deal." "Not a big deal." Her voice went up an octave. "Lucas, Janet from HR just asked me if I could put in a good word about their home network security. Marcus from sales, you know, blockchain Marcus? He cornered me by the coffee machine to ask if you take on private clients. And Deborah from accounting literally winked at me. Winked. Like I'd won some kind of lottery by marrying you." I tried very hard not to laugh and failed completely. "I mean, you did win a lottery. I'm a catch. Very handsome, moderately employed, excellent taste in wood stain." This isn't funny. But she was laughing now too. That slightly hysterical laugh that happens when your entire perception of reality shifts and you don't know whether to be angry or amazed. Everyone's been treating you like arm candy for 3 years, and it turns out you're still the same guy, I finished. Just a guy who happens to know his way around a server room and also enjoys building furniture on weekends. "Nothing's changed, Clara." "Everything's changed," she countered. "You humiliated Brian at the party, and now everyone knows you actually had the credentials to do it. Do you understand? You weren't just some husband standing up for his wife. You were." She stopped, and I could practically hear her brain rewiring 3 years of assumptions. "You were the guy who literally keeps his company running, and he spat on you." "Yeah," I said quietly. He did. There was a long pause, filled only with the ambient noise of her office and the distant sound of someone at Home Depot announcing a sale on garden supplies over the PA system. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked finally, and there was hurt in her voice now. "Why didn't you ever mention that you work for Bright Edge?" "I work for lots of companies, Clara. It's what consultants do. We build systems, we maintain them, we move on to the next project. Bright Edge was just another client." I picked up the early American stain again, studying it like it held the secrets of the universe. "And honestly, I liked being just your husband. Not Lucas Gray, cybersecurity expert. Just Lucas, the guy you married because I made you laugh and I remembered your coffee order and I didn't care about corporate politics or climbing ladders or any of that stuff. You still made me look like an idiot," she said, but there was no real heat in it anymore. "You're not an idiot. You're brilliant at your job. That's got nothing to do with what I do. You earned your position, your promotions, everything. I'm just the guy who makes sure the lights stay on in the background." I paused. Though I gotta say, watching Brian find out who I really am must have been pretty entertaining. She snorted, actually snorted, which meant she was past being mad and into the territory of finding this whole situation as absurd as I did. He tried to play it cool, but everyone could tell he was dying inside. Especially after someone, I think it was Sandra from Client Relations, asked him why he'd called our critical infrastructure consultant a carpenter at the party. Ouch. Yeah, it's been making the rounds. Every department knows about it by now. You're kind of famous here, Lucas. Or infamous. I'm not sure which. Great, I muttered. That's exactly what I wanted. Corporate fame. Well, you've got it. Along with approximately 17 LinkedIn connection requests, an invitation to speak at the next company tech summit. And, oh, this is the best part. Brian's been locked in his office all morning. His assistant says he's reviewing strategic priorities, but everyone knows he's just hiding. I should have felt bad for the guy. Should have been the bigger person, taken the high road, all those cliches about maturity and professionalism. But after watching him belittle my wife, spit on me, and strut around like he owned the place, yeah, I was enjoying this way more than I probably should. "So what now?" I asked. "What's the vibe at the office?" "Weird," Clara admitted. "Really weird. People keep looking at me differently. Like I'm suddenly more interesting because my husband isn't who they thought he was. Which is kind of insulting when you think about it, but also." She trailed off. "Also kind of validating?" I suggested. "Maybe. A little. Is that terrible?" "Nah. You've been working your ass off in that place for years while people made assumptions about both of us. Let them reassess. Let them feel awkward. They earned it." She was quiet for a moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer. "Brian tried to talk to me earlier. Cornered me in the hallway, actually. He wanted to clear the air about the party." My grip tightened on the phone. "What did he say?" "That he was drunk, that he didn't mean anything by it, that he hopes there are no hard feelings." She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "He didn't apologize, Lucas. He just made excuses and then tried to laugh it off like it was all some big misunderstanding." "Of course he did. I didn't laugh with him. I just told him I had a meeting and walked away." His face. She paused, and I could hear the smile creeping into her voice. His face was priceless. "That's my girl. Your girl who's married to a secret cybersecurity genius, apparently. Any other surprises I should know about? Are you also a brain surgeon? An astronaut? Do you have a secret identity as Batman?" "Just the one secret identity," I assured her. "And honestly, it's not that exciting. Mostly I sit at a computer and make sure bad guys can't steal credit card numbers. Very glamorous stuff." "Uh-huh. The CFO called you critical infrastructure. That sounds pretty glamorous to me. The CFO likes buzzwords. Next quarter I'll be mission critical synergy or something equally ridiculous." I grabbed both wood stain samples and headed toward the checkout. "Look, I gotta go pay for this stuff and get home. But Clara, for what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't tell you. I wasn't trying to keep secrets. I just like being regular with you. You're not regular, Lucas. You never were. I'm just finally figuring that out. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Ask me after I survive this week," she said. "Everyone wants to talk about you, and I have no idea what to say. Yeah, my husband's a tech wizard. Surprise, doesn't really cover it. Tell them I'm still figuring out what stain colors, and I'm very boring in person. Nobody's going to believe that anymore. Then tell them the truth. I'm just a guy who's really good with computers and really bad at corporate parties. She laughed. Finally, a real laugh this time. I love you, you know. Even when you're impossible. Love you too. Even when you drag me to terrible parties where your boss spits on me. That's only happened once. Once was enough, trust me. We hung up, and I stood there in the checkout line at Home Depot, surrounded by contractors and DIY enthusiasts and regular people buying regular things, and I smiled. The week after the great revelation, as I'd started calling it in my head, was like watching a really slow-motion car crash that somehow also involved fireworks and a mariachi band. Everything at Bright Edge Media had shifted, and according to Clara's increasingly detailed evening debriefs, the office had essentially split into two camps. Team, holy crap, Lucas is actually important, and team, how did we not know this? Brian, unsurprisingly, had formed his own special category. Team, pretend nothing happened while slowly dying inside. I was working from home on a Thursday afternoon, halfway through a security audit for a pharmaceutical company that was somehow less dramatic than my wife's marketing firm, when Clara texted me. He cornered me in the break room. I didn't need to ask who he was. There was only one he who mattered in the ongoing saga of my accidentally becoming Bright Edge's most talked about spouse. My phone rang 2 seconds later. Are you okay? I asked immediately, because Brian had already proven he had the emotional regulation skills of a toddler who'd been told he couldn't have candy. I'm fine, Clara said, but her voice had that edge to it. The one that meant she was definitely not fine, but was holding it together through sheer force of will and probably spite. But Lucas, he actually tried to. She stopped, and I heard her take a breath. He tried to blame me, said I should have told him who you were, that I made him look bad at the party. I stood up from my desk, so fast my chair rolled backward and hit the wall. He what? Yeah, we were both getting coffee, and he just appeared, like a corporate vampire. Started going on about how embarrassing this whole situation has been for him, how I should have been upfront about your credentials, and how this could have all been avoided if I'd just been honest. She laughed, but it was sharp enough to cut glass. Like it's my fault he got drunk and spat on you. What did you say? I was pacing now, my free hand clenched into a fist, mentally calculating how inappropriate it would be to show up at Bright Edge and have a very direct conversation with Brian Kavanaugh about professional boundaries and basic human decency. I told him that maybe he should have told you to wait for your turn, and then he'd remember how this whole mess started. I stopped pacing. You said that. Word for word. Direct quote. His own words right back at him. There was satisfaction in her voice now, the kind that comes from finally standing up to someone who's had it coming for way too long. You should have seen his face, Lucas. He looked like I'd slapped him. Which, for the record, I wanted to do, but HR frowns on workplace violence apparently. That's my girl, I said, grinning despite the anger still simmering in my chest. What did he do? Sputtered. Literally sputtered like a broken engine. Tried to say something about taking things out of context and misunderstanding his intentions. But by then Sandra from Client Relations had walked in and obviously heard everything. Clara's tone shifted to gleeful. Sandra, who happens to be best friends with Jennifer, Brian's assistant, who then told literally everyone. How long did it take for the whole office to know? I'd say 45 minutes, but I'm being generous. It was probably more like 20. I sat back down, my anger morphing into something closer to satisfaction. So what's the vibe now? Chaotic. Beautiful. Brian's been holed up in his office most of the day. People are talking, not even trying to be subtle about it. I heard 2 junior designers discussing it by the printer. Marcus from sales, blockchain Marcus, apparently started a betting pool on whether Brian's going to resign or get fired. What are the odds? 3 to 1 he's gone by end of quarter. Though personally, I think he's too stubborn and too arrogant to quit. He'll have to be dragged out kicking and screaming while insisting it's all part of his master plan. She wasn't wrong. Guys like Brian didn't go quietly. They went down swinging, taking credit for their wins and blaming everyone else for their losses, rewriting history until they were the heroes of their own increasingly delusional narratives. How are you holding up? I asked, because this wasn't just office gossip anymore. This was her career, her daily environment, and her boss was imploding in real time. Honestly, I'm weirdly okay. Better than okay, actually. She paused, and I could picture her sitting at her desk, twirling a pen the way she did when she was thinking. For 3 years, Lucas, I've been walking on eggshells around Brian. Being careful, being diplomatic, making excuses for his behavior because that's what you do when you want to keep your job and get promoted. But now everyone knows he's full of it. They know he disrespected you. They know he tried to take credit for your work, and they know he's been acting like a territorial jackass. You sound almost happy about this. Maybe I am. Is that terrible? Nah, it's human. The guy's been awful to you. To everyone, probably. And now he's facing consequences. That's not terrible. That's justice with a side of karma. Over the next few days, Clara kept me updated on the ongoing saga. Brian had apparently tried to rally support from other department heads, painting himself as the victim of some elaborate misunderstanding. It didn't work. Turned out when you build a reputation on being difficult, condescending, and inappropriate, people aren't super eager to defend you when you finally face the music. The executives, meanwhile, had discovered that I existed and decided I was suddenly very interesting. Clara forwarded me emails. Invitations to networking dinners, requests for coffee meetings, one guy from the C-suite who wanted to pick my brain about digital transformation strategies, which was corporate speak for give me free consulting. I ignored most of them, politely, professionally, but firmly. Because here's the thing. I didn't want to be BrightEdge's new golden boy. I didn't want to schmooze with executives or attend strategy meetings or get pulled into their corporate games. I'd built their system, I maintained it, and that was the extent of my interest in their company. Clara got promoted 3 weeks later. Not Brian's position, not yet, but a senior role that came with better pay, her own office, and most importantly, a different reporting structure. She wouldn't be working directly under Brian anymore. Some VP named Catherine Shun would be her new boss, and according to office gossip, Catherine was everything Brian wasn't: professional, respectful, and actually qualified for her job. She asked about you. Clara told me over dinner one night. We were at our favorite Italian place, celebrating her promotion with wine that cost more than $15 and pasta that we didn't have to cook ourselves. Asked what? If you'd be interested in consulting on a new project. Something about expanding their cybersecurity protocols for international clients. She swirled her wine, studying my face. I told her I'd ask, but that you were pretty selective about your contracts. I am selective. And also, I don't want to work somewhere where your boss might spit on me. She nearly spit out her wine laughing. Brian's not. He wouldn't. She stopped, thought about it. Okay, yeah, fair point. Besides, I continued, cutting into my chicken parmesan like I was making a very important point. You're doing great there on your own. You don't need me swooping in like some tech superhero. You're Clara Gray, senior marketing strategist, and general badass. That's got nothing to do with who you're married to. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Thank you for that. For what? For letting me have this. My career, my success. Without making it about you. Sweetheart, it was never about me. You earned every bit of this. I paused. Though I gotta say, watching Brian squirm has been a nice bonus. He's been different lately. Quieter. Less strutting around like he owns the place. Good. Maybe he learned something. Maybe, Clara said, but she didn't sound convinced. Or maybe he's just plotting his comeback. Prideful men never really learn, do they? She was right about that. Guys like Brian didn't change. They just got better at hiding who they really were until the next opportunity to show their ass presented itself. But that was future Lucas's problem. Present Lucas was enjoying wine, pasta, and celebrating his wife's success, while secretly hoping Brian Kavanaugh was somewhere having a very bad day. So here's something nobody tells you about corporate drama. It doesn't end with a neat little bow. It festers. It mutates. It turns into the kind of thing that eventually requires HR intervention, which is basically the corporate equivalent of calling in a SWAT team to negotiate with a hostage situation, except the hostages are employee morale and basic workplace dignity. 6 weeks after the party incident, I got an email that made me laugh so hard I nearly dropped my coffee. The subject line read, "Professional consultation request, confidential." It was from Angela Martinez, BrightEdge's head of human resources, and the gist of it was this. They were conducting a formal review of workplace conduct issues stemming from the annual party, and would I be willing to participate as a third-party professional consultant to provide context about the incident? Third-party consultant. That was rich. What they really meant was, We need you to come in and tell us what happened so we can figure out if we need to fire your wife's boss without getting sued. I called Clara immediately. Did you know about this? About what? She sounded distracted, probably in the middle of some presentation about brand synergy or consumer engagement metrics or whatever marketing people present about. HR wants me to come in for a meeting. About the party. There was a pause. The kind of pause that means your spouse is processing information and trying to decide whether to be excited, horrified, or some combination of both. They do. Yeah. Apparently, there's been a formal complaint about Brian's behavior, and they want my perspective as a witness. Or a victim. Or possibly as entertainment. I'm not really sure. Oh my God. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Lucas, do you know what this means? That I get to relive the magical moment when your boss spat on me while wearing a suit that costs more than our couch. It means they're actually taking this seriously. They're building a case. I could hear the smile in her voice now. He might actually face real consequences. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy, I said, and I meant every word. The meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday at 2 p.m., which gave me exactly 5 days to decide whether I was going to be professional and diplomatic or whether I was going to walk in there and let every sarcastic thought I'd been holding back for 3 years fly free like caffeinated pigeons. Clara voted for professional and diplomatic. I told her I'd take it under advisement, which in husband speak means I'll try, but I'm making no promises. Tuesday arrived with all the enthusiasm of a dental appointment. I put on my good suit, the one I'd bought for a cousin's wedding and had worn maybe 3 times since, and drove to Brightedge's downtown offices. The building was one of those modern glass monstrosities that looked like someone had stacked a bunch of shiny rectangles on top of each other and called it architecture. Very cutting edge. Very expensive. Very look at us. We're a successful marketing company. Security in the lobby had me sign in, gave me a visitor badge that said consultant in big letters like I was some kind of corporate mercenary, and directed me to the 14th floor where HR had their kingdom. The elevator ride up was silent except for smooth jazz that was somehow both boring and vaguely threatening, which I guess is the vibe you want when you're about to participate in someone's potential career execution. Angela Martinez met me in the reception area. She was probably in her mid-40s, with the kind of efficient professionalism that suggested she'd seen every variety of workplace nonsense and had stopped being surprised by human behavior sometime around 2015. Mr. Gray, thank you for coming. I know this is unusual. Happy to help, I said, which was technically true. I was very happy to help document Brian Kavanaugh's downfall. She led me to a conference room, the kind with a big table, uncomfortable chairs, and one of those speaker phones in the middle that never works properly. There were 3 other people already there. A guy I didn't recognize who looked like he was from legal, a woman with a laptop who was probably taking notes, and, oh, this was perfect, Jennifer, Brian's assistant, who looked like she'd rather be literally anywhere else. We appreciate your willingness to participate in this review. Angela began once we were all seated. This is a confidential proceeding regarding an incident at the company's annual celebration 6 weeks ago. We're gathering testimony from witnesses to better understand what occurred and determine appropriate next steps. Translation: we're trying to figure out if we can fire Brian without him suing us into the Stone Age. Before we begin, the legal guy interjected. I want to clarify that this is purely informational. We're not making any accusations or determinations at this time. Translation: everything we're about to discuss is absolutely making accusations and determinations, but we have to pretend it's not for liability reasons. Sure, I said. Whatever you need. Angela opened a folder in front of her. Can you describe, in your own words, what happened at the party on the evening of September 12th? So I did. I walked them through the whole thing. Brian's approach, his condescending craftsman comments, the escalation, and finally, the main event. His little speech about how Clara was his during work hours and I needed to wait for my turn, followed by the spit. I kept it factual, professional, resisted the urge to add color commentary about Brian's hair gel budget or the fact that he'd been drunk enough to pickle a small vegetable. The note-taking woman's fingers were flying across her keyboard. Legal guy was stone-faced. Jennifer looked like she wanted to melt into her chair and disappear. And were there witnesses to this incident? Angela asked. About 40 of them, give or take. It was pretty crowded around the bar. I leaned back in my chair. I'm sure several people could corroborate the story, unless they were all really focused on the shrimp cocktail. Angela made a note. We've spoken with several attendees. Their accounts align with yours. She glanced at legal guy, who gave a slight nod. Mr. Gray, I'm going to show you something. We'd like your confirmation that this is an accurate recording of the incident. She pulled out an iPad and turned it toward me. Someone, probably Sandra from Client Relations, based on the angle, had recorded video of the whole thing. There was Brian in all his glory, swaying slightly, drink in hand, delivering his territorial speech with the confidence of a man who genuinely believed he was being inspirational rather than HR's worst nightmare. The audio was surprisingly clear. She's mine at work. You wait for your turn at home. Then came the spit. On video it looked even worse than I remembered. Casual, dismissive, like I was something stuck to the bottom of his shoe. My response was there too. You sure you're her boss? 'Cause that's the kind of thing HR uses as training material. Even in the stuffy conference room, watching it 6 weeks later, that line still landed. Legal guy's mouth twitched like he was fighting a smile. The note-taking woman coughed to cover what might have been a laugh. Yes, I said, pushing the iPad back toward Angela. That's what happened. And how did this incident make you feel? Angela asked, which was such an HR question I almost rolled my eyes. Disrespected, I said simply. He spat on me. That's not normal human behavior. That's not professional behavior. That's barely civilized behavior. If someone did that to him, he'd probably sue them and write a LinkedIn post about workplace toxicity. Jennifer made a noise that might have been a suppressed laugh. Everyone pretended not to notice. Angela made more notes. Mr. Gray, were you aware at the time of the incident that Mr. Kavanaugh was your wife's direct supervisor? I was. That's actually what made it worse. He wasn't just being inappropriate to some random guy at a party. He was being inappropriate to an employee's spouse while making ownership claims about that employee. I searched for the right words. That's textbook hostile workplace environment material. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I've sat through enough corporate training videos to know that's not okay. It's not, Angela confirmed, her voice carefully neutral. It is, in fact, very much not okay. The meeting continued for another 30 minutes. They asked about my relationship with Clara, about my work history with Bright Edge, about whether I'd had any other interactions with Brian. I answered everything honestly, professionally, and with only minimal sarcasm, which I thought showed incredible restraint on my part. As we were wrapping up, Angela looked at me with something that might have been sympathy or possibly respect. Mr. Gray, on behalf of Bright Edge Media, I want to apologize for what you experienced at our company event. That behavior doesn't reflect our values or standards. I appreciate that, I said. Though maybe you should save that apology for your employees who have to work with him every day. We're addressing that, she said, and something in her tone told me that Brian Kavanaugh's days at Bright Edge were numbered in single digits. I left the building feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Clara texted me before I even made it to my truck. How'd it go? Let's just say, I typed back, HR has some interesting video evidence of your former boss's people skills. Or lack thereof. Former boss? Give it time, I replied. Give it time. 3 days later, Brian Kavanaugh was suspended pending investigation. 2 weeks after that, he resigned to pursue other opportunities, which everyone knew was corporate code for, we were absolutely going to fire you, but we're letting you quit so you can pretend you have dignity. I got a gift basket from Bright Edge's executive team, fancy coffee, expensive chocolate, and a polite note thanking me for my professionalism and cooperation. There was also a confidential settlement offer attached, basically asking me to sign an NDA in exchange for a modest payment. I declined the NDA but kept the chocolate. My silence, after all, was worth way more than their budget could afford. Time has this funny way of smoothing out rough edges. 3 months after Brian's dramatic exit, or voluntary resignation to pursue passion projects, as the official company memo called it, which was corporate bullshit for, we caught you being a jackass on camera. Things at Bright Edge had settled into a new normal. A better normal. The kind of normal where people didn't tiptoe around their boss like he was a landmine with a personality disorder and a gel budget. Clara came home one evening in late January with news that made me put down my power drill mid-project. I was building a shoe rack for the mudroom because apparently my carpenter reputation needed maintaining, and also because our entryway looked like a footwear explosion had occurred. They offered me Brian's position, she said, standing in the doorway of the garage with her coat still on and snowflakes melting in her hair. Her face was doing this thing where she was trying to look calm and professional, but her eyes were screaming, "Holy shit! Holy shit! Holy shit!" I set down the drill carefully, wiped sawdust off my hands, and walked over to her. "Say that again?" "Creative director. Brian's old job. Catherine offered it to me this afternoon." She was smiling now, that huge genuine smile that I'd fallen in love with back in college when she was just a girl with big dreams and a tendency to steal my hoodies. "Lucas, I got it. I actually got it." I picked her up and spun her around right there in the garage, her laughter echoing off the walls and probably confusing our neighbor who was taking out his trash. "That's my girl. I told you that you were too good for that place. Turns out I was wrong. You're exactly perfect for that place now that they've removed the human obstacle." She smacked my shoulder, but was still grinning. "Don't be mean. He's gone. We can be gracious in victory." "I can be gracious," I said, setting her down. "I just choose not to be. There's a difference." The promotion came with everything she deserved: better salary, actual authority, her own parking spot, which was apparently a big deal in the world of corporate status symbols, and most importantly, respect. No more late-night texts from a boss who thought her time belonged to him. No more walking on eggshells. No more making excuses for someone else's bad behavior. She threw herself into the role with the kind of energy that would have made motivational speakers weep with envy. Within a month, she'd restructured her team, implemented new workflow processes that didn't rely on intimidation and ego, and somehow made the creative department a place people actually wanted to work. Her employees started smiling in the hallways. Productivity went up. The weird tension that had hung over Bright Edge like a toxic cloud started to dissipate. "You know what the best part is?" she told me one night while we were cooking dinner together, or rather, while she was cooking and I was helping by eating ingredients and offering commentary. "People actually talk to me now. Not because they're scared or because they're trying to get on my good side. They just talk. Like I'm a human being. It's revolutionary. That's called basic respect, sweetheart. You might have heard of it." "Revolutionary for Bright Edge," she clarified, stealing back the piece of bell pepper I'd just snagged. "The culture shift has been insane. We had a team meeting last week where people actually shared honest feedback, constructive criticism, creative disagreements. Nobody cried or feared for their job. It was amazing." I kissed her temple. "You're amazing. There's a difference." Of course, the universe being what it is, ironic and occasionally hilarious, the annual company party rolled around again in March. Same venue, same rooftop bar, same overpriced everything, but with a completely different energy. Clara was nervous about bringing me, which was understandable given that the last party had basically turned into a viral video that ended someone's career. "Just promise me," she said while we were getting ready, "that you won't start any drama." "I never start drama," I protested, adjusting my tie in the mirror. "I merely participate in drama that others have initiated. There's a distinction." "Lucas." "Clara, I'm serious. This is my first big event as creative director. I need it to go smoothly. Then don't invite anyone who spits on people, and we should be fine." She threw a sock at me, which was fair. The party was everything I remembered and nothing like it at the same time. Same glittering rooftop, same jazz band that sounded like they were making it up as they went along. Same appetizers that cost more per bite than a regular person's lunch. But the atmosphere was different, lighter somehow, like someone had opened a window in a stuffy room and let actual air in. People approached me differently this time. No more condescending pats on the shoulder or dismissive, "Oh, the carpenter husband" introductions. They actually wanted to talk to me, like I was a real person. Wild concept. Marcus from sales, blockchain Marcus, who had apparently given up on crypto and moved on to NFTs because he had a type, cornered me by the bar within 15 minutes. "Lucas, man, I've been meaning to ask you. I've got this home network set up, and I think maybe someone's piggybacking on my Wi-Fi. Is there like a way to check that?" I blinked at him. "You're asking me for free tech support at a party?" "I mean, yeah." He looked genuinely confused, like he couldn't understand why that might be inappropriate. "Marcus, buddy, I charge $200 an hour for consultations." His face fell. "Oh, right. Sorry, I didn't mean to." "I'm kidding," I said, taking pity on him. "Change your router password to something that isn't password 123 and you'll be fine." Also, enable WPA3 encryption if your router supports it. You're a lifesaver, man. He actually fist bumped me, which was both endearing and slightly cringe. A woman from the design team whose name I couldn't remember, but who had always been polite, approached next. I heard you build furniture in your spare time. Do you take commissions? I've been looking for a custom bookshelf for my apartment, and everything online is either ugly or costs a fortune. I mostly just build stuff for fun, I admitted. But send me the dimensions and what you're looking for. I'll see what I can do. No promises, but I like a good design challenge. Her face lit up. Really? That would be amazing. My Instagram is full of bookshelf inspiration if you want to see. He doesn't have Instagram, Clara interjected smoothly, appearing at my side with 2 glasses of wine. Lucas exists in a social media void. It's very zen. It's very lazy, I corrected. I just don't care what people are eating for breakfast or what their thoughts on current events are. Present company excluded. The evening continued like that. A steady stream of people actually treating me like a human being with skills and interests rather than just an accessory to Clara's career. Deborah from accounting asked about encryption protocols for personal documents. Todd tried to engage me in a conversation about blockchain again, but I redirected him toward Marcus and watched them disappear into their own little tech bro conversation bubble. Sandra from client relations asked if I knew anything about her smart home devices possibly being hacked, which led to a surprisingly interesting discussion about IoT security vulnerabilities. At one point, a junior developer whose badge said Travis approached nervously. Mr. Gray, I just wanted to say, the system you built for us is really elegant. I've been studying the architecture as part of my onboarding, and the way you structured the authentication protocols is just chef's kiss. I actually felt myself blush, which was ridiculous. Thanks, man. That means a lot coming from someone who actually looks at the code. Are you kidding? You're like a legend in our department. We have a whole channel in Slack dedicated to analyzing your work. That's either really flattering or really creepy. I haven't decided which. Definitely flattering, Travis assured me. Your goals, dude. After he left, Clara leaned in close. You have fans. Actual fans. How does that feel? Weird, I admitted. Also kind of cool, but mostly weird. Later in the evening, a small group had gathered around me near the bar. Combination of techies, creatives, and random people who apparently found me interesting now that I wasn't just Clara's husband, the carpenter. Someone asked about the difference between penetration testing and vulnerability assessments. Someone else wanted to know if I really built furniture or if that was just a cover story for being a secret agent, which was absurd but also kind of flattering. Rule 1, I said, warming to my audience and maybe also to my third beer. Never underestimate a man with a hammer. Rule 2, never underestimate a man with a firewall. Master both, and you're basically unstoppable. People actually laughed, real laughs, not polite corporate chuckles. Clara was watching from across the group with this expression that was part pride, part amusement, part, I can't believe this is my life now. Rule 3, I continued, because apparently I was on a roll. If someone spits on you at a company party, make sure there's video evidence. Really helps with the HR proceedings later. The laughter got louder, more genuine. Everyone knew what I was referring to. The Brian incident had become office legend, the kind of story that gets told to new hires as both entertainment and cautionary tale. Clara came over after the group dispersed, sliding her arm through mine. Having fun, actually? Yeah, this is way better than last year. Lower bar to clear, to be fair. True. But still, people are cool when they're not scared of their boss or trying to impress some tyrant with hair gel issues. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Thank you. For what? For being you. For standing up to him. For not letting me make excuses. The thing about karma is that it doesn't work on your schedule. It takes its sweet time, meandering through the universe like a drunk tourist looking for the bathroom. And then, bam, it shows up exactly when you least expect it and delivers justice with the precision of a laser-guided missile wrapped in irony. It was September again, almost exactly 1 year after the original party incident, and I was at a cybersecurity conference in Chicago. One of those massive conventions where tech nerds gather to discuss threat vectors and zero-day exploits while consuming alarming amounts of hotel coffee and pretending the continental breakfast counts as actual food. I was on a panel about infrastructure security, Apparently, my reputation had grown beyond just fixing people's home networks and keeping marketing companies from getting hacked by bored teenagers in Eastern Europe. The conference center was one of those sprawling complexes that required a map and a decent sense of direction to navigate, which meant I was perpetually lost and late to everything. I just finished my panel discussion and was heading toward the exhibition hall, where various companies were showing off their latest security solutions, most of which were either unnecessary or solving problems that didn't actually exist. That's when I saw him, Brian Kavanaugh, standing at a booth for some startup called Secure Flow Solutions, wearing a polo shirt with their logo embroidered on it, and a smile that looked like it had been stapled to his face. He was doing a demo for a couple of uninterested attendees, gesturing enthusiastically at a monitor displaying what appeared to be the world's most boring dashboard. I stopped walking, just stood there in the middle of the aisle like someone had pressed pause on my life, watching this man who'd spat on me, belittled my wife, and strutted around Bright Edge like he owned the place, now reduced to working a vendor booth at a tech conference. The universe, I decided, had an excellent sense of humor. I could have walked away. Should have walked away, probably. Taken the high road. Been the bigger person, all those cliches about maturity, and moving on. But here's the thing about me. I'm petty enough to appreciate cosmic justice, but not so mature that I'll pass up the opportunity to witness it up close. I walked over to his booth, hands in my pockets, casual as Sunday morning. He didn't recognize me at first. His eyes did that thing salespeople do where they assess whether you're worth their time or just another browser who's going to take a free pin and leave. Then recognition hit, and I watched his face cycle through about 17 different emotions in 3 seconds. Surprise, confusion, fear, embarrassment, and finally settling on something that looked like a person trying to swallow a live fish. "Lucas," he said, and his voice cracked slightly on my name. "Wow. Hi. I didn't expect to see you here." "Funny," I said, picking up one of the brochures from his booth and pretending to read it. "I work in cybersecurity. This is a cybersecurity conference. Where else would I be? Right? Of course." Yeah. He was sweating now. I could see it on his forehead despite the aggressive air conditioning. "You were on that panel earlier, weren't you? Infrastructure security." "I was. You catch any of it?" "No. I was. We've been pretty busy here at the booth." He gestured vaguely at the empty space around us. The booth next to his had at least 15 people clustered around it. His had me and a guy who appeared to be sleeping standing up. "Looks like it," I said, not even trying to hide the sarcasm. An awkward silence settled between us, the kind that's so thick you could cut it with a knife and serve it at uncomfortable dinners. He was fidgeting with a stylus, clicking it repeatedly like it was a nervous tic he'd developed. The polo shirt he was wearing looked cheap, not the tailored suits he used to rock at Bright Edge. His hair was different too, less aggressively styled, like maybe he'd finally run out of hair gel budget. "So," he said finally, clearly desperate to fill the silence with literally anything. "You're doing well, I see. Big panel, probably consulting for major companies. Good for you." "Yeah, it's going well. Clara's doing great too, in case you were wondering." His jaw tightened. "That's good. I'm glad. She's creative director now." "Your old job, actually." "Well, I say your old job, but really she's made it into something completely different. Better. People actually like working there now. Productivity's up, morale's up, turnover's down. Funny how that works when you treat employees like human beings instead of property." The color drained from his face. "Look, Lucas, about that night. The night you spat on me." I kept my voice conversational, friendly even, like we were discussing the weather or sports scores. "The night you told me I had to wait for my turn with my own wife? That night, I was drunk. I made a mistake. I've apologized." "No, you haven't," I interrupted. "You made excuses. You tried to blame Clara for not warning you about who I was, like it was her job to protect you from your own terrible behavior. You never actually apologized, Brian. You just got caught and had to face consequences for the first time in your probably very privileged life." He looked like he wanted to argue, to defend himself, to spin some narrative where he was the victim of circumstances beyond his control. But something in my expression must have told him that I wasn't buying whatever he was selling. "What do you want me to say?" he asked quietly. "Nothing. I don't want anything from you." I put down the brochure. "I'm just enjoying the view. The universe has a way of sorting things out, you know? You thought you were untouchable at Bright Edge. Thought you could treat people however you wanted because you had power and influence and a fancy title. And now here you are, working a booth at a conference, probably making a fraction of what you used to make, trying to convince people to buy software that, I glanced at his display, appears to do exactly what every other security solution does, but with a prettier interface. It's a good product, he said defensively, but there was no conviction in it. I'm sure it is, and I'm sure you're doing your best with it. But here's the thing, Brian. You had everything. A great job, talented team, resources, respect. And you pissed it all away because you couldn't handle the basic concept of treating people with dignity. That's not bad luck. That's not circumstances. That's choices. I watched him process this, saw him trying to find some comeback, some way to salvage his pride. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again like a fish gasping for air. For what it's worth, I continued, I hope you learned something from all this. I hope you're different now. Better. But honestly, I don't really care either way. You're not my problem anymore. You're not Clara's problem anymore. You're just a guy at a booth at a conference, and I'm just a guy walking by. I started to walk away, then paused and turned back. Oh, and Brian, just so we're clear on the final score here, Clara's running your old department and killing it. I'm on panels and consulting for companies that actually value expertise over ego. And you're. I gestured at the booth, at the cheap polo shirt, at the empty space around him. Well, you're here. His face had gone red now. That particular shade of humiliation mixed with impotent rage. You think you're so much better than me. I don't think about you at all, actually, I said, borrowing a line from every comeback compilation ever because sometimes the classics work. But if I did, yeah, I'd think I was better. Because I don't spit on people. I don't claim ownership of other human beings. And when I screw up, I apologize instead of making excuses. I patted his shoulder, the same condescending gesture he'd used on me at that party a year ago. Good luck with the booth, buddy. Hope you sell. Whatever it is you're selling here. I walked away without looking back, my heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and satisfaction. Behind me, I could hear him sputtering something, probably trying to formulate a comeback that would never come. I pulled out my phone and texted Clara. You're not going to believe who I just ran into. She replied within seconds. Who? Brian. Working a vendor booth at the conference. Looking like someone who finally learned that actions have consequences. OMG. How was it? Therapeutic, I typed back. Very therapeutic. That evening, I called her from my hotel room. She was at home, probably curled up on the couch with a glass of wine and whatever Netflix show we were binge-watching together. We talked for an hour, about the conference, about Brian, about how far we'd both come in the last year. Do you feel bad for him? She asked at one point. I thought about it, really thought about it. No, I feel like justice happened. Not because I made it happen, but because the universe has a way of correcting itself. He built his career on intimidation and ego, and that foundation crumbled. That's not my fault. That's just gravity. You're very philosophical tonight. I'm very petty tonight, I corrected. But I'm dressing it up in philosophy to sound mature. She laughed, that genuine, from-the-belly laugh that I loved. I'm proud of you. For standing up to him then, for being gracious now. I wasn't gracious. I was sarcastic and pointed and definitely rubbed salt in the wound. Okay, for being appropriately sarcastic then. For showing him that good guys don't always finish last. We don't, I agreed. Sometimes we finish exactly where we're supposed to be, and the bad guys end up working booths at conferences in cheap polo shirts. It's poetic, really. A year ago, Brian Kavanaugh had looked at me and seen nothing. Just a carpenter, just a spouse, just someone beneath his notice. He'd felt comfortable enough in his power to be cruel, to be dismissive, to literally spit in my direction because he thought there would be no consequences. But power based on intimidation is just a house of cards waiting for a strong wind. And sometimes that wind comes from the most unexpected directions. From the carpenter, who turns out to be the guy keeping your company's servers running. From the wife, who's better at your job than you ever were. From the universe itself deciding that enough is enough. I'd once thought the best revenge was watching someone realize they'd picked the wrong fight. I was wrong. The best revenge was moving forward, building something better, and then accidentally running into them years later when they're at their lowest and you're thriving. And maybe, just maybe, reminding them one last time exactly why karma is real and patience really is a virtue. Hey Clara, I said before we hung up. Yeah, she's mine everywhere now. Not just at work. Everywhere. She was quiet for a moment. Then, damn right I am. And that, finally, was the last word on Brian Kavanaugh. If you think this is wild, you haven't heard anything yet. The real madness lives in my audiobook, Brutal Cheating Stories That Shocked the World. Click the link in the pinned comment and dive in. It is betrayal, exposure, and karma on full volume.